What's up, nerds? My name's Croy and you're watching Croy Recordings, and we're back with a brand new video. In this video, I'm going to break down my mix template. What is a mix template, you may ask? This is the starting point of every single mix that I work on. I have built this over time. It is constantly evolving. I was tweaking it the other day, and I figured, why don't I share this? This could make a cool video. So this is the starting place for every single one of my mixes. I import the tracks that the artists provide into this template, and I start mixing. It saves me time. It allows me to mix quickly. Your mix template is kind of like a personal thing, and this allows me to mix music the way that I like. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump into it. So in front of me, I have a Pro Tools session, and you can see my mix template. We have a bunch of routing folders, as well as we have an instrument bus, a mix bus, and a master bus. So production effects, drums, perc, bass, guitars, strings, and effects, not the vocals, route to this instrument bus because that is the instrumental, and then the vocals and the instrumental bus route to the mix bus, and then the mix bus goes to the master bus, and that is where I print the master. So to the right of the master bus, we have the rough mix and the reference mix. And the reason why I have tracks for these is because they are routed in a way in which I can just click a button over here and listen to that mix in real time. So I can be, working on the course of a track, and then I can press one button and the rough mix will be lined up. It'll be the same volume, and I'll be able to hear what's going on in the rough mix and make decisions based on that. And then if the client says, hey, I want my mix to sound like this production, or if I have an idea of what I think the production should sound like, I can throw that in the mix and again just switch to it really quickly, which allows you to make some really insightful decisions fast. So that is why there's tracks there. So let's go through and let's go from left to right and break this all down. So the first thing is this production effects routing folder. And in here, normally I have these actually all hidden like that, but I like to leave some effects set up that if I want to throw stuff in to make a chorus slam or to make a transition work better, I have a bunch of go-to sounds here. So you can see that we have some risers, some slams, some things that land on the downbeat, and then some claps and some long other risers and whooshes. And these are just a bunch of go-to sounds that I've found, and whenever I find something I like, I'll just throw it in here. So it's really easy to throw it into the session. Oftentimes when a client hires me to mix a song, they don't provide anything that would be in this folder. So lots of times I'll just create that in the mix if I think it serves the song. But if a client does provide like a bass drop or a verse crash or anything like that, that finds its way in this production effects folder. That's it for production effects. Oftentimes I'm just throwing files in here. There's not much in the way of processing, and then I have that all in one folder here, nice and organized. So if I want to mute all of them, I can do it by just clicking here. Up next, we have the drums. So as you can see here, we have kick, snare, toms, cymbals, and rooms. So let's say I receive an acoustic drum performance multi-track. So it has a kick in and a kick out mic. I'll place them in this folder here. Snare top, snare bottom, that goes in here. All of the toms go in here. For cymbals, I'll put the overheads as well as the hi-hat and the ride mic or any other spot microphone. And then for rooms, I'll put all of the rooms, close rooms, far rooms, mono rooms. They all go into this folder here. And this just allows me to manage all of those files much better. I used to have it where all of the individual files would just be in a row. So I'd have kick in microphone, kick out microphone, kick sample, and then, snare top, snare bottom, whatever. But I always found it kind of frustrating when a client would ask, hey, could you make the kick drum a little brighter throughout the entire mix? And I would have 3 kick files, and I'd have to decide, okay, how do I make the kick brighter? Do I turn the high end on one of these? Do I turn up the kick track that has more high end information? Whereas in this case, when I sum them all to one folder, it becomes really easy. I can just pop an EQ on here, or let's say the revision is, hey, can you turn the kick drums down? I can just turn down this one track, and it simplifies things. The way my workflow works, let's say we're talking about a snare drum. In here, someone will provide a snare top, a snare bottom, maybe a snare sample, and I'll throw them all in here, and then maybe I'll add my own sample into the equation, and from there, I'll create a balance that I think makes sense in relation to the entire drum sound. And then I'll close this folder. And since they all sum this one track here, it becomes really easy to just dial in the snare sound. You're not worried about compressing 5 different samples differently. You can treat it as one instrument, compress it, and EQ it up here. And it just kind of simplifies the process and makes it a little bit more manageable. So let's look at the plugins real quick. So on all of these sum tracks here, we have the virtual mix rack, which isn't doing anything. It has 2 little EQs that I'm comfortable using, that I like the sound of, as well as a compressor, which is in bypass. I'm using the distressor on all of the tracks because it's kind of a Swiss Army knife of compression. You can do a lot of different styles of compression. Truthfully, it's very common for me to, throw on an instance of Pro Q3 or try out different compressors, but I like to keep the template simple and not bog myself down thinking because I have this inactive compressor on here, I should make it active and I should find a way to use it. I think for me and the way my brain works, keeping this simple makes it so I'm not overthinking things. So over here, we have 4 effects. We have snare verb, drum verb, kick and snare, and crush. And I'll break these down in just a second. But as you can see, on each one of these tracks, I have them sent to the crush, not pre-fader. So if this fader's all the way down, nothing is being sent. If it's all the way up, it's being sent at unity. And I have that across the board here. And then I have the kick and snare sent to this kick and snare bus, which I'll break down in a second. The snare is being sent to the snare verb. And then I have all of these being sent equally to the drum verb. I also have a kick key and a snare key. These are essentially buses that send all of the kicks pre-fader and all of the snares pre-fader on their own individual buses, and there's no destination for these. They're just being sent. So if I do want to sidechain anything to the snare drum, if I do want to sidechain anything to the kick drum, I can do it. It's already set up. It eliminates the step of just having to go through, find a bus, send it, remember what bus it was, input it into the plugin. They're just set up and ready to go. We'll go from right to left here. So we have this crush. This is parallel compression. On here, I have the monster compressor on here set, fastest attack, fastest release. I'll generally mess around with the release a little bit to get the pump of the drums to feel right, but I like the aggressiveness of having it really, really fast. So that's where I start. I have JST clip on there just to clip off any transients. And because everything is already sent to it, once I dial in the drum mix, I can just turn this up to taste and kind of get a feel for how that interacts with the drums. On top of all that, I have a different parallel compression called kick and snare, which I don't know what this compressor is based off of, but these settings right here is super aggressive. Really makes the transient snap right off the bat. So it's really fun on kick and snare, especially in a competitive like rock mix where you want it to be really aggressive. So I can get the balance of this, and then let's say I want that kick and snare to cut through a little bit more. I can just turn this up to taste, and then I can start dialing in the ambience of the drums if I think reverb is the move, and same thing with the snare reverb. As you can see, by having these things pre-routed over here and having the effects set up, it makes it really easy to just try things out and see if you're moving in the right direction. And in the event that you're not happy with this drum reverb, everything's already routed to it, so you can just quickly swap things out, try something else out, and dial in a drum mix that works for you. Or I guess works for me. This is my mix template. So once I'm satisfied with the balance of the drums and the effects, these all route to this drum folder here. I'll close it and I'll open this up. The reason why I have the VMR on all of these tracks here is just because it's a plugin that allows you to do a bunch of different types of EQ, a bunch of different types of compression. By having it there, if I'm just like, the drums need to be brighter, I can just quickly try something out, see if it works, and keep moving forward. But in this instance, this is off and it's set up in a way where it's not actually doing anything. After that, we have the VBC VG Red. This has been my go-to drum compressor. It works well. Sometimes I'll change it out. The truth is that I'm always trying different compressors and really just trying to get a feel for what works. I find when it comes to drum compression, the tempo of the track and the intensity of the performance really factor into how the compression should be used. Sometimes this works and sometimes this doesn't. So on different mixes, you might see me use different types of compression here, but this is a strong kind of go-to compressor. I have JST clip here made inactive, but sometimes I like to clip my drums, so it's just set up there if I want to use it. That is essentially how I will dial in a drum mix, and if I want the drums to be a little bit more mono, I can now just use the panning of this drum folder. If I want to automate the drums down in the verse, I can just automate this down, and if I want to turn up a fill, I can automate it up. Just taking a step outside of this, a key theme in this template is giving yourself areas in which you can access specific elements and manipulate them to taste. And what I mean by that is you can have 10 different kick tracks here, and you now have one place where you can access the EQ of all of those kick tracks. And then same thing with the snare, same thing with the toms, and all the way through. And then you have one place to access the EQ of the entire drum kit and the compression on the entire drum kit. And then that sends to the instrumental bus, and then you have a place where you can access the entire instrumental at one place and turn that up or turn that down or brighten it, compress it, whatever. So that's a theme that will continue through this. And that is essentially drum mix. One thing I did miss is I do have these are 2 audio tracks with trigger on it. So if I do want to just drag audio onto there, I can quickly dial in samples. I have like a close mic kick sound and a like reverby kick sound. And the same thing works for the snare drum. So it's fun to just have those set up. Makes it easy to dial in a competitive drum mix. So that is the drum portion of the template. Let's move forward to this percussion folder. So on the folder, you can see that there's nothing going on. This is off. And then inside the folder, I do keep a couple different tambourines and shaker samples that are all set up in Elastic Audio. So whatever the tempo of the session is, it will automatically mangle these to be in line with that tempo. And I can kind of decide which shaker sample or tambourine sample works. And if that doesn't work, well, then we head on over to Splice. And if the client provides any shakers or tambourines, they'll end up in here. here, as well as if there is, let's say it's a song that has acoustic drums and then there's like an electric drum portion of the song, it's common for me to just put that in this percussion folder, so then I can manipulate the acoustic drums by themselves in this folder, right? If I want to make them brighter, darker, or compress them, I can do that over here without manipulating the sound of the electronic drum kit sound, and then I can dial that tone in over here and have them isolated, which is a good thing and works really well for me. Okay, let's move forward to the bass. So on the bass, we have another instance of virtual mix rack doing nothing. This is off. And when we open it up, we see that we have B send, B return, and bass audio. So with bass, there's a couple different ways I like to approach it, but oftentimes when I'm being hired to mix a track, I will address the tuning of the bass, especially if it's a real performance, and I might fix some timing things. But often what I do is I will actually send the bass through my 1176 compressor, which is behind me. So I have this B send and B return set up where it'll output 15 and return in 15, which is what I have routed on the patch bay. So simply put, I can throw bass on this track here, hit record, and boom, I'm running it through the compressor. What I like to do, and this is kind of part of my mix prepping process, which I'll make a video on later because I have a whole rundown of how I like to prep things. What I like to do is I generally like to EQ the bass a little bit before the compression. Maybe I'll automate some volume so it's hitting the compressor in a certain way, or maybe I'll cut out some dead space, or like I said, maybe I'll tune the bass or do whatever I have to do. I'll do those prep steps and then I'll run through the compressor, and that leaves me with a ready to mix bass track. I'll throw it on here. In my template, I used to have like a split bass technique where I'd have the bass low and the bass high, and I still do that from time to time, but I found other ways of achieving similar results that I think work better for some of the music that I work on. I don't lock myself into that in this template. As you can see, I have a track called bass audio with nothing on it. So depending on the track and what I think the end result of the bass should be, I'll decide that in real time because usually it only takes a couple plugins and it's pretty quick to dial in. Okay, on the bass folder track here, as I mentioned, VMR not doing anything, I have this instance of EQ match, which is hilarious, but I really like this bass EQ. So sometimes when I'm dialing in the bass, I'll just compare my bass tone against it and see if I need to make mine brighter or if mine has too much mid-range, or how the low end is interacting. So that's a bit of a cheat code that I like to have set up. And then I have track spacer set up, which is sidechained against the kick. So every time the kick hits, if I engage this, the low end, just the low end of the bass will duck, which allows your low end to play nicely together. I have those set up and ready to go. That's the bass guitar. Let's move on to guitars. I never mentioned this, but I generally work on like rock-based music. This template is designed for rock-based music. So in the guitar folder, you guessed it, we have another instance of VMR with nothing on it. And then we have two folders within it called guitar rhythm and guitar lead. I'll break down my workflow here. So let's say there's a track with stereo rhythm guitars in the chorus and the verse. They could be on the same track. They could be on different tracks. I'll throw those in here and then I'll process those like one instrument. So I like using this amplified instrument processor by Cornef. I think this is an amazing guitar tool. It gives you everything you need to dial in a great guitar sound. I find by limiting myself to using this, I'm not going down the rabbit hole with Pro Q3 just chasing a billion different annoying frequencies and over EQing the guitars. So this is a great tool, and I'll apply that across all the rhythm guitars. And then same thing with the leads. I will throw all the lead tracks into this folder here and apply processing on them across the board. Now, if I want something that might not fit within these two, I'll just leave them outside of these groups. There's nothing wrong with that. That is kind of my workflow on guitars. Moving on over to strings. This is a poorly labeled folder. Strings, to me, includes piano, includes synths. So anything that isn't a guitar, but is also kind of like a mid-range instrument, fits into the strings folder. As you can see, there's nothing going on in there. Generally, the sources that fall into this folder vary so much that I'm not applying one type of processing across the board, right? Let's say in the strings folder, I have a stereo piano, and then I have a cello, and then I have a, string ensemble, and then I have a synth. Those are all going to require different processing, so I'll kind of treat them as individual instruments, but I like to have them sent to one place. So if I want to just mute them all at once, I can do so. And then we got the vocals. So let's open this up. So we have a send and return, and this works the same way that the send and return on the bass track works. Actually, it works exactly the same way. It is just a track that routes out 15 and routes in 15, which goes to my 1176. It is very common for me to use my 1176 on vocals. So we can see here, we have lead vocal, we have background 1, background 2, background 3. I like to throw all of my lead vocals, if they're on different tracks, into this one folder, and then it gives me an opportunity to just tweak my lead vocals on here. If I have harmonies, I'll throw them in here, and I might even rename this harmony. If I have, let's say, oohs and ahs or some sort of choir vocal, I'll throw them in here. And if I have, screaming vocals, I'll throw them in here. These are like nameless folders, which I can throw sources of audio into and categorize the vocals, be able to process all the screams one way, the choir vocals another way, the harmonies another way, and the lead vocal another way, which is a level of control I like to have in the mix. It really simplifies things instead of just seeing all your vocals spread out across your screen. And then let's say the mix revision is turn the harmonies up. Well, I know I'll just turn the harmony track up one. Or if it's like turn the choir vocals down or add more reverb to the choir vocals. It's all organized on one track, which again, just simplifies the process. In the vocal folder, I have these throws set up called quarter note or throw quarter note and throw eighth note. And they're the same effects. This is just like a effects chain that I use on throws that kind of like lo-fi's the throw and shoots it out. So it distorts it, filters it, and then delays it by a quarter note and an eighth note. And depending on the context, I have a reverb afterwards that I can either turn the mix down on or turn the mix up on, which washes out the throw. But delay throws are a very, very common thing and a great way to punch up your productions. So it's not uncommon for me to just grab part of the lead vocal, throw it down on the throw track, grab another part of the lead vocal, throw it down on the throw track, and that's how I like to create my throws. I know some people like to use automation, but I like to just actually have it as a piece of audio on a track. So all of the vocals here send over here to this vocal mix. And on here, we have virtual mix rack doing absolutely nothing. But if I want to EQ the vocals, boom, I can make the whole thing brighter. Sometimes what I like doing is I like to use CLA effects, which I know is like a meme of a plugin. I have it set up in my template that the parameters that I like to automate are all ready to go. And let's say on the chorus, I want to change the reverb style. I can do it across the board. And let's say I want to add a quarter note delay on all the choruses. I can do that with the automation there. So I like to have that set up and ready to go. And it's something I use a surprising amount. And then afterwards, an instance of soothe. I find, especially when you have a lot of vocal tracks, having soothe in... Actually, let me change this right now because I used to have it on this preset, but I like this one a little bit more. Boom. When you have a lot of vocal stacks, individually they can all sound fine, but as they build up, if they're all singing the same note, it can create these areas where there's too much of a certain frequency. So by just having this gently across all the vocals, it's really, really nice. And then on the sends, we have the vocal key, the V key here, which actually is sent to my instrument bus. So I can sidechain the vocals against the instrumental, and I can actually, if I get this going, this only is being applied to the center channel of the instrumental, so it's not affecting the sides at all. And when you have a really, really dense mix, big guitars, big drums, and it's really intense and you're trying to fit a vocal into it, this is a fun little last minute move you can make to just make space for the vocal against the instrumental. So I have that set up and ready to go, and I can decide to use it if I want. Okay, let's keep on moving. So up next we have effects. This is something that recently that I'm experimenting with. I have all of my effects in one folder here. So if I want to apply, let's say, plate reverb to all my vocals, I can do it like that. If I want to just apply that to my lead vocal, I can put it over here. I used to have all of my effects in each of my buses. It would look like this, and these would be routed to the vocal. What I've found is that by having vocal effects and then having guitar effects and then having effects in the string bus, it's just really redundant. It's not efficient and it complicates things for no reason. What I'm experimenting with right now is just having the effects as a global thing. So I can send a lead vocal and a guitar, for example, to the same reverb, which I think will create a more cohesive mix, a mix where everything feels like it's in the same space without having to use two instances of the same plugin. And so this is a bit of an experiment that I'm just working with now, and we'll see if I like it. But yeah, I just like to have some effects set up. So 2 different plates. L-verb just stands for long reverb. A slap back delay, which is great. A quarter note and an eighth note delay. This micro effect, I use this on lead vocals and choruses and stuff, and I think this is so cool. You pitch up the vocal an octave, and then you throw micro shift on it, and it just creates this nice glossy glow around the lead vocal. This track here is, I like this IRL studio preset. It just sounds like a really small live room. It's a really convincing reverb. So if I want something to just have the illusion that it's actually in just a small kind of tight space, this is set up and ready to go. And then it's called G delay. And essentially it's just like the delay, my go-to delay for lead guitars. There we go. That is the effects. So if we keep moving, we have the instrument bus, and as I mentioned, prod effects, drums, perc, bass, guitar, strings, and effects are sent to the instrumental bus. And on here, we have an instance of Neutron 3, which someone just told me to try this out, and I've left it on my template ever since, and I'm afraid to take it off. Sometimes on my instrumental bus, It depends on the type of production, but sometimes the vocals can interfere with the bus compression that is being applied across your track, meaning that the vocals can make it so the bus compression isn't grabbing so much on the drums, which can be undesirable. It's not uncommon for me to throw my bus compression off of my mix track and throw it onto my instrumental track. So essentially my instrumental is being compressed, but my vocals are not being compressed with the instrumental, and I can add my compression on the vocal track here. Is that making sense? On my instrumental bus, I have this Ozone Imager plugin where this is set up already ready to be automated, and it's not uncommon for me to go to it, and let's say we're leading up to a chorus. I can make the chorus a little wider for a moment right off the bat, or better yet, I can make a part leading into the chorus just a little narrower, so then the chorus has the illusion of sounding bigger. Or just in general, like let's say I just want to add some dynamic width to the track, so I can just kind of create the illusion that the verses get a little more panned in, and then the choruses sound larger than life. When working on a track, you can only make things so loud, so bright, so dark. So by doing something like this, it makes it easier than just automating all the drums and all the bass and everything inwards. As I mentioned, track spacer, so vocals side-chained against the instrumental only in the center channel to make room for the vocals in a dense mix. At the bottom here, I have auto key. Generally, I will have my guitar nearby and I can just like pluck away, and that's the fastest way to find the key. But if I'm working on my laptop and I don't have an instrument near me and I don't feel like setting up a virtual instrument to figure out what key it's in, it's just a quick, easy way to use it. As well as, let's say I have auto tune on a bunch of plugins already and I want to set them all to a certain key, I can just really quickly be like, this song's in A major. Okay, moving on to the mix bus. So this has been my go-to mix bus compressor. I like the way it sounds. For the longest time I was using a G-bus type of compressor, and the G-bus works. There's a time and place for it, but I find for more aggressive tracks, sometimes you want an even faster attack. I will go back and forth between this and the G-bus generally when it comes to compression across the entire mix, but lately this has been what I've been working with. Afterwards, we have max bass, which is a great way of getting a little bit more low and low mid, which makes things translate better on headphones and whatnot. So this generally chills inactive. I'll click it on and go, is this better or worse? And not really think too long about it. And if it's better, go with it. And then next to it, similar idea, this virtual tape machine. And this plugin in the settings, steal this, the go-to settings. This really warms up a track, which sounds like silly audio words, but it adds like a little bump in the low end. And it's just soften things ever so slightly. These are just really minor moves that you can assess once you've mixed the track. Is this better or worse? Yes or no, it's kind of like a binary option. And then on the master track, believe it or not, sometimes I like to use JST clip on the master track. Oh, fire me, sue me, whatever. It's a great way to get some extra loudness out of a track. Works really well when the track isn't very dynamic. Like if you have like a balls to the wall rock mix where it's just like a sausage all the way through, then you can just shave off the peaks of things and get it even louder without the limiter sounding like it's really engaging. Then we have Ozone. It starts with an EQ that is doing nothing. This is just a great way for me when I'm in the final stages. If things need to be brighter or I just need to carve something out, I can do so here. We have this imager, which is essentially just making anything below 100 hertz or wherever this is set. I set this a long time ago, is mono, and that's on the entire mix. So I'm mixing hearing this at all times. This is something that I've just left on. I honestly don't know how much of a difference it makes in the grand scheme of things, but it's doing some minor harmonic saturation. And then I leave the limiter off for obvious reasons. And at the very end, I'll start applying this and messing around with it. Sometimes I'll add vintage tape before the maximizer, depending on the type of track that I'm working on. Might use it at 15 IPS and crank the drive, and it's a fun way to get some character. But that is generally the last step in the process. And then I will export that and I will send it to the artist. Pray that they like it. There you go. That is my mix template. I hope everything I said made sense. Maybe it got you thinking in a different way about how you can approach mixing your music or how you can have things set up. Did you like this video? Did you learn something? Nice. Consider subscribing. That would be cool. That's it. I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.